Welcome to the World of Eora, a news and lore podcast about Pillars of Eternity and Avowed. I'm your host, Eric, aka Gingerino. Thank you so much for joining me as we dive into the history, lore, and game mechanics for the worlds that Obsidian has created for us. Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of the World of Eora. I'm your host Eric, aka Gingerino. Thanks everyone for joining me on another episode as we dive through the history, lore, and game mechanics for Pillars of Eternity 1 and 2 and Avowed. If you're wondering why we bring all those games together, it's because they share the same fantasy setting known as Eora. And so the hope of this show is to dive into this world, explore the lore, the world building, and the stories that are going on there as just a means to enjoy this fantasy world that Obsidian has created and get deeper into the games that they've made for us. If you're new to the show, welcome to the show. Really happy to have you here. I'm Eric, aka Gingerino, the host of the show, and this will be a good episode to start off with, although if you are brand new, I will recommend at some point going to episode 0, where I can signpost you to some of the more foundational lore, like talking about the magic of this world, the different races of this world, and how things operate, if you want to get a base understanding of how things go. But today will be a good episode to start off with as well. I was intending to talk about a lot more in today's episode than just the Necropants and the Revenant Collar Bell, but I got on several tangents as I was going through today's episode, and this is kind of what we ended up with. So I've come to really enjoy some of the writing that is in these unique pieces of armor. But before we dive into the lore, let's talk about some news related to Obsidian Entertainment, the developers of all these games, and that is that Carrie Patel, the lead director for Avowed, has left Obsidian to go work at, call it Night Studios. A lot of articles are saying Netflix Game Studio, and the Night Studio, I believe, is the one that created the games Oxenfree 1 and 2, and it seems that Carrie Patel has left Obsidian to go work for them as a lead director in whatever project they're working on. So we don't really know if there's what the reason is, if this is something that Carrie's had her eye on for a while, or if there's any turmoil going on at Obsidian and so she's just trying to find something else, or if this is a passion project where someone approached her, or if she was offered a really good contract, or if there was an issue at Obsidian and there's conflict going on. We have no idea what's going on. But regardless, I know for myself, and I'm sure a lot of people and everyone at Obsidian, they wish Carrie Patel the best. It is weird to see her go, especially when Avowed is still going to be in the support phase. They're still going to be releasing content for Avowed throughout this year. So I know everyone's kind of got their standing and marching orders on what to do for the game. But with the lead director not being there, it feels weird, right? I imagine there must be some weirdness going on at Obsidian as they're developing and updating and supporting Avowed, but the lead director isn't there anymore. But either way, it's exciting to see new opportunities for her. And to be fair, Carrie's got a lot of experience in narrative design and a lot of writing within the games world, and Night Studios definitely seems fairly narrative heavy in their games, I would say. Not that Obsidian isn't, but perhaps Night Studios is something that she might, enjoy more, or maybe she vibes with it better. I'm not sure. I'm just thinking off the dome at this point in time. But we wish her the best, obviously, and I hope everyone at Obsidian is also doing well. We don't know what's going on, who's going to take over leading the game as it goes through support, or if it's just kind of do the work that was laid before you and then Avowed support will be done. Does this mean there might not be any DLC? I don't know. I mean, Obsidian has had other directors come in to direct DLC for games in the past. Carrie Patel's one example, where I can't remember which DLC or if it was both, but she directed some of the DLC for The Outer Worlds, even though she wasn't the game director for the base game. And so who knows, if there is going to be a new director for Avowed, maybe that would indicate that there is going to be DLC or some expansion. But yeah, there's not a lot of details on the news, but the news itself is fairly big. So that's what's going on there. So aside from that, not really much else that I want to discuss. So let's start diving into the lore for some interesting, unique armor and items that we find in the games of Avowed and Pillars of Eternity 1 and 2.
Half the locals would arrest you for trespassing and the rest would kill you outright. I'm curious, what exactly did you find there?
So I first want to start off with one of my favorite pieces of armor from the entire game, and I wore it for as long as I possibly could, I think, before switching out to the actual end game. And unfortunately, this is a piece of armor that you get a little bit later, in the latter half of the game, or maybe at 2/3 of the way through the game. And I would have absolutely loved to have kept these on for the entire time. I know people love this, and people rave on it on Reddit all the time as being their favorite armor. In part because it is actually fairly useful. It does have some good stats with it. As well, the description in the lore is kind of quirky and odd, and it also looks really interesting. And of course, I'm talking about Necropants from Avowed. So the Necropants, if you didn't know, and they're not called the Necropants, I'm just calling it that. They're just referred to in Avowed as Necropants. They're a unique scale armor that you can find in Avowed. And you'll usually find them in the exceptional quality because you are finding them in Shatterscarp. So they're fairly high up on the scale in terms of where you can find them in terms of upgrading quality. The really cool thing about them is, one, it grants you the ability to summon a specter to fight for you. A specter is like a type of creature that exists within the lore of this world. There are different kinds of creatures within the game of Avowed, within the world of Eora, actually. And the one category of creatures are, I guess you could say, spirits, spirit-based kind of creatures. And so you can have things like phantoms, you can have things like specters, you can have things like shadows, or they're not called banshees, they're called Kiangulas, but I always call them banshees from different other kinds of lore. And it's really interesting because a lot of the lore surrounding these spiritual types of creatures revolve around the idea of these creatures or these people whose souls refuse to move on, or they are stuck in the world, like they can't actually move on for some reason. And their soul doesn't necrotize, but it just sort of becomes like corrupted or bitter or like rotten, if you will. Is kind of like how I like to think about it. And so they become violent and they lash out violently against people nearby. The Kiangulas, for example, are women who are killed very violently, and the anger and malice that they feel from that violent death stays where they are, and then they haunt and kill people in those areas. Some people's souls literally are unable to re-enter into the wheel, which is the cycle of reincarnation that exists within this world, and because they can't go into the wheel and move on into the next life and then reincarnate into a new person, they kind of just stagnate and get rotten as they stay there, and they become more and more violent, and they're prone to act out. And so thinking about that lore, it's really interesting that you can just summon a specter to fight with you, and we'll read the description of Necropants to understand why. The other part of Necropants that is great is it's poison-proofed. At least that's the name of the trait. You have a plus 30% resistance to poison accumulation, which, that's always good. Who doesn't want that kind of a thing? So anyways, like most pieces of unique weapons or armor or items, there is some interesting unique lore that comes with it. And so when you go into your inventory, you highlight Necropants. If you read the actual item description, you'll get a blurb that you won't find anywhere else in the game. And so when reading Necropants, this is what it says. These wretched pants are cold to the touch, and faint whispers can be sensed in the peripheries of one's mind while wearing them. Needle-thin shards of Adra inside of the legwear poke into the wearer's flesh, forming a spiritual connection between them and the soul that is trapped within. When called upon, the imprisoned spirit manifests beside the pants to defend its wearer with all of its might. These pants are not to be used lightly, as the only way for the soul within to be freed is if someone dies while wearing them to take its place. Whatever possessed someone to craft pants from the skinned legs of an Amaoan is a mystery that not even WoW could solve. So I don't know how many of you out there actually took the time to read the unique lore for so many of these items. If you did, Necropants kind of probably really stood out because, one, their name is Necropants. Two, aside from the description, the visual of Necropants is kind of hilarious. Like, as far as armor goes, it doesn't look like it should help you that much because it's just pants. And as you might know from playing Avowed, when you select something in the armor category, it's generally covering or considering covering your entire body. And so you can't choose Necropants as well as a shirt. You're just running around with a pair of essentially leggings, and your torso is out and exposed to the world around you. And so it's hilarious to run around in this weird fish-like yoga pants is basically what it kind of looks like you're running around in. I saw a guy on Reddit, I wish I could remember the name, is it's just popping in my head now. Used Necropants and a special spear, a unique spear in the game that looked like a trident, and they basically made a like Aquaman person, like their character looked like Aquaman, and I thought it was one of the funniest things I've seen on Reddit for Avowed. But anyways, I digress. So the pants themselves already look really hilarious. It's a great reason to go into third person mode or just check them out when you have them in your inventory. But the description of this thing is also really unnerving and kind of weird. So these wretched pants, which we find out later in description, are basically actually just the skin of an Amauan person, which is kind of morbid, the fact that you're wearing that. I do want to point that out. It is a little bit morbid and odd. But beyond that, they also give you faint whispers that can be sensed in the peripheries of one's mind. I'm not sure how there's the peripheries of one's mind, like if it's just sort of something that like you need to think about later, but you're not thinking about now. Like it's almost like a constant reminder of something that's coming up. So you can like, I don't know, but so you can hear faint whispers in the peripheries of your mind. So there's like, if you are busy doing something else, maybe you won't notice it, but then when you're not busy and focused on something, perhaps you hear the faint whispers. I'm not sure. So that's kind of unnerving. I wouldn't want to wear these pants to bed because you wouldn't be able to sleep as easy. Plus, the next part of the description says that there are needle-thin shards of Audra inside the legwear that poke into the wearer's flesh. So this is really interesting, and I think it would also be really cool to use these pants in conjunction with like some sort of monk-based build, because monks in the World of Eora, they really run off of pain. Like the monks in Eora, they have this thing called mortification of the flesh, and they use the pain that they inflict upon themselves to bolster their energy of their soul, and then they use that kind of built-up energy in their soul to perform superhuman feats, like punching a guy 15 times in a microsecond, or running really fast, or creating like dual versions of yourself, or I can't remember what a lot of the monk-specific stuff in Eora is, but the big thing lore-wise about monks is that they inflict pain upon themselves to embolden their soul, to like build up its energy, and they use that energy to do monk stuff. It's really, really interesting, and there's actually some monk orders out there that I really would like to have more on, and I was hoping Avowed would kind of elaborate on some of it, but so far they haven't. Fun fact, you can actually play a monk in Avowed. You have to build the class. You don't get to select one, but you can build a sort of monk facsimile in Avowed. You can wear like the Ring of Transcendent Suffering, which in itself is a reference to Pillars of Eternity, and you could wear pants like these that poke your legs from the inside, and so like it's inflicting pain, right? Like there's kind of some role play there. But as well, there's some abilities that you can choose as you level up, which make you basically just punchy kicky people, and that's how you go around beating up your enemies, is you literally are punching them. So you can create a monk person in your Avowed character build. There's really only one build to do with a little bit of variability, but still cool to see that that's there. So you have these needle-like fins of Audra that are poking you in the flesh, and it forms a spiritual connection between you and the soul trapped within. I've noticed a lot of like souls being trapped in weapons and armor kind of scenarios going on in Avowed. Like this isn't the first unique piece of weapon or armor that we've seen that references a person's soul being trapped inside. This actually gets mentioned a lot in different unique pieces of armor or weapons. For example, there is a weapon called Ismalt's Meteoric Apparatus. This is a unique arquebus that you can get within the game. And there's not a ton of lore that you get from reading the description, but going through it here, it says that it was developed by an ill-fated rival wizard of Quetzal, who is one of the archmages within the Circle of Archmagi within this world. This strange gun was designed to bridge the gap in arcane skill in a duel with the archwizard, which ultimately ended very badly for Ismalt. The weapon misfired in the duel, instantly trapping a fragment of the wizard's soul in the shard of Audra that powers the gun. That fragment just so happens to stabilize the fireball launching device for future users. Quetzal claimed the device as a prize and token of hubris. How it ended up in the Living Lands is a mystery. So this is a unique arquebus that you can get in the game. A couple of things worth mentioning while I'm sitting here talking about it is we have Quetzal, Citzal, is one of the archwizards of this world. So if you've played the game long enough to meet Ringrim, who is an archmage in Avowed that we get to meet, Quetzal is another such archmage. Different than Ringrim, obviously. They have a different focus and study. And it seemed that Quetzal had an ill-fated rival named Ismalt, who developed this weapon they called the meteoric apparatus as a way to kill Kitzel in a duel. However, it didn't go their way. The gun misfired, and I guess the way it was built and the magic that was in it instantly caused Ismalt's soul, or at least a portion of their soul, to become trapped within the gun itself, which now powers the gun with the energy that is in that person's soul. And so we have that repeated motif of a person's soul, either whole or part of it, being trapped within weapons or armor, and that is what gives these items the unique ability they have. And I talked about this in another episode, where whenever you have these weird, unique enchantments going on, it's usually because soul energy, or the stuff that's called essence, is being infused into these items in different ways, and that gives it magical properties. So in the case of Ismalt's meteoric apparatus, which, lights enemies on fire, or can start to develop, fire accumulation on enemies, that kind of magic ability is coming from Ismalt's soul, or a portion of it, being trapped within the gun. And that's why it's kind of referred to as a fireball launching device. So there's a little bit of lore there in terms of Kitzel, the Archmage, and his arch nemesis, Ismalt, and how that gun is powered. And we see that going back with Necropants, that there is a soul trapped within Necropants. Now, we don't know who the soul that is trapped within Necropants, but theoretically speaking, it could be a number of people that have been inside of the Necropants, both in terms of wearing it and the soul that's currently there. Because it seems, as we read later on, that the only way for the soul that's trapped within these pants to be freed is if somebody dies while wearing the pants, then their soul gets trapped in place of the other one, thus freeing the previous soul inside. And it's really interesting as well, because the soul that is trapped inside of these pants can be called out to essentially defend the wearer with all of its might. That's what it says here. When called upon, the imprisoned spirit manifests beside the pants to defend its wearer with all of its might. And I find that interesting, because, specters, alongside phantoms and shadows, they are basically souls that are bound to the material plane, and that kind of leads to a sort of corruption of their soul. And I suppose that corruption would explain the question in my head of why would the specter fight to protect the wearer of the pants if they are trapped inside them? But I suppose that there is probably some sort of twisting of the soul and the way that it thinks about the world and views the world, that perhaps it feels this need to protect the pants, despite the fact that that's the thing trapping it within the world. And perhaps that's also because they are inside the pants, so in a way that if you attack the pants, you're attacking the specter, and there's this, self-preservation instinct that perhaps the specter has. And maybe that's a giant social commentary for the things that we get trapped in our life. It can turn us into these ghostly specters, and we become a shadow of our former selves, and we defend it at all costs, even though it's the thing that's hurting us and keeping us from being free in the long run, etc., etc. Perhaps you have something in your life that are necropants for you, that you need someone else to die in so you can be freed from it. This is where I think the metaphor is kind of breaking down, and also probably wasn't on purpose from the developer's point of view. But you get what I'm saying. So that's what these pants are. There is essentially a soul trapped inside of them. There's Audra poking you in the legs. And I think that's kind of an important detail. The Audra would be the actual stuff that houses the soul. The soul isn't just ephemerally hanging out next to the pants. It's actually trapped inside the Audra that is woven into the fabric of the pants. But as we already kind of mentioned, it's not really fabric. It is crafted from the skinned legs of an Amawan, which is Kai, your companion in the game of Avowed, is an Amawan. So, if you just imagine Kai's legs being skinned off of his body and shaped and formed into a pair of wearable pants, that's essentially what you're walking around with. And that's really awful, Obsidian. That's incredibly morbid. But, people were saying on Reddit that they hope that Avowed will have some darker tones like Pillars of Eternity did. And while I think Avowed kind of has a more colorful art palette, and that it can be some lighter in mood, which was on purpose, and personally I'm a huge fan of, I feel like walking around wearing the skinned legs of a previous person that a soul is now trapped inside of is pretty dark and morbid stuff. So, kudos to Obsidian for doing that, I guess. And so you're walking around wearing the skin legs of an Amawan, and it just ends off this little blurb with, "This is a mystery that not even Wal could solve," which as a devoted Walite myself, I find heretical to say, but I suppose within the religions of Wal, there is really no such thing as heresy, or everything is heresy. It's kind of hard to tell. Wal, for those curious, is one of the gods of the world, one of the 11 gods within the pantheon of Eora. Just like a lot of other fantasy games, there are fantasy gods, and Wal is one of them. Wal being the god of dreams, secrets, mysteries, and revelations. Primarily, Wal is associated with dreams as well, so he likes to interact with people in dreams. Why? We don't know, just for funsies. He likes to take really esoteric hidden knowledge and just disseminate it amongst the populace for no reason. And then he also likes to take information and make it esoteric where people don't know things. So he is god of dreams, secrets, mysteries, and revelations, literally revealing a lot of secrets to the world or to people who will then think that that person is insane. And then he is also keeping things secret that perhaps other people should know. Like, well, there's something important going on in the sky, but we don't know what that is. How many secrets exist within the world? We don't know. Wal is an interesting person or thing. Here, let me give you an example of how crazy the deity of Wal is. Wal literally willed themselves to forget something about their own body existing. I'm not kidding you. Wal literally decided, oh, I don't remember anymore that I have had a body. And they just forgot it. And when they come to the realization, or they come to learn this fact all over again, they're delighted. Like, oh, that's so cool. I was able to learn this thing about myself. Like, wow, really chill, dude. And I find the religions around Wal just really crazy and fun. That's why Wal is my favorite god. It just, the mental games you play with yourself to try to figure out this nonsensical deity and entity is really honestly great. I like the idea of this god not being able to be put inside of a box, despite that sometimes they are. So yeah, those are necropants. I'm not exactly sure how it is that when you die in those pants that your soul then ends up in the pants and the other soul is freed. Like, I don't know what mechanism causes that. Perhaps there is some sort of magical enchantment that houses a soul to stay trapped within the pants when they die, but there is just somehow not enough room. And so when you enter into the pants, it kind of forces this other soul to leave. I guess it's just the best guess that I currently have for it. Another fun fact about Necropants, by the way, it is tied to an achievement in the game of Avowed. So if you are looking to get all the achievements, but you haven't looked it all up yet, just a quick little hint for you. There is an achievement for wearing the Necropants alongside the Revenant Bell Collar, which I think is an item you could technically miss, by the way. I'm not sure if you can go back and get it if you don't respond in a dialogue a certain way, but whatever. The Revenant Bell Collar, for those curious, is another unique item in the game. It's considered an amulet, so it's like an accessory that you wear. It gives you the ability to summon a Revenant to fight with you. A Revenant is not a spirit creature. This is a vessel creature. Vessel is a category of creature in this world. It's essentially undead, is what it is. So as something tries to become immortal, by refusing to let their soul go on to the next life or tethering it to their body so their soul can't leave their body continues to die and degrade as if it was dead, but they're still living in the sense that they have a soul in their body that's keeping everything moving. So as their body degrades, it enters into these different stages of undeath, if you will. And a Revenant is one of those kind of later stages where you're essentially just a walking corpse. You can't think or do anything of your own accord. And you're essentially a zombie right before you turn into a skeleton that only knows violence and killing things. But Revenants are seen in the game of Avowed, in the region of Emerald Stair, as being used as undead labor. Essentially animancers, which are the scientists of the soul, they're trying to essentially use Revenants and program them, since they have such very base cognitive functions in the first place, but they're not just these mindless killing machines like skeletons are. There is probably a faint echo of a person in there. They're somehow trying to suppress that violent urge that Revenants normally have that is associated with the need to feed on things that have essence so that they can stave off their decomposition. They're trying to, suppress this violent tendencies of a Revenant and then somehow, I'm guessing, replace it with the need to till soil. I don't know how the Animancer is doing that. I'm going to be honest. I hadn't really thought about much of that until just now when I went on this side tangent. I don't understand how the Animancer is doing it. So yeah, because that's really what it is. The Revenant is so degraded along this, when you're first undead, you're still cognitive, right? But you have a dead body. And so that's why the first stage is called Vampire. I think it's directly referencing vampire, which is supposed to be an undead creature that can still think for itself. But as the progression or the degradation, if you will, of this thing's body continues on. You enter into Dargul or Ghouldom, where you're a lot less the person you were before, but you still have some cognitive ability and you're still able to think for yourself, but your body is degraded very significantly and you're becoming more and more animalistic and just drawn and driven by your desire to feed on living flesh, literally flesh that has suffused essence inside of it, because everything has essence inside of it that's alive. It's the stuff that makes the world go round in Eora. But Revenant is the point where you are no longer really the person that you were before, right? Like, your personality is now gone. You're just now basically running on instinct, and that only instinct is to feed. But what if you could suppress that instinct to feed in the Revenant? What if you were, as an Animancer, able to push that instinct away from whatever little bit of a soul remains in the Revenant? What if you were able to push that instinct to feed away? What would it be replaced with? Or could you choose to replace it with something? And perhaps that's how the Animancers are doing this. Perhaps the Animancers are finding a way to suppress this urge to feed, and they were replacing it with something else. Now, the question in my head now at this point is, how are they replacing it with the desire to, till the soil or pull the weeds or do like basic agricultural labor? Like, what is it that they are doing at that point in time? Are they perhaps infusing small shards of another person's soul into the Revenant that were very, very dedicated to their job as agricultural workers, and so they just feel this kind of latent sense of, oh, I need to do this agriculture related work? Like, I don't know how they're doing it, or if they are literally connecting some sort of like positive feedback whenever they do things, like a Pavlov's dog scenario, because Revenants, they do want to feed. So what if they actually don't suppress the feeding thing? And what if instead they mildly suppress it so that they are hungry, but not enough to kill everything that they see? And then whenever they perform a certain task, such as basic agricultural labor, they then feed them, for lack of a better word, with a little bit of essence, thus connecting the action of performing laborious tasks with getting fed. I think, honestly, we might have cracked the case. Listen, so here's, if anyone from Obsidian is listening, and I don't know if you are at this point in time, you guys have a lot of work to do over at Obsidian, what with Carrie going away, and now you guys have like stuff that you're working on for the updates. We don't know if there's DLC coming, so I don't actually know if someone is listening, but if you are, please, someone at Obsidian, send me an email if there is an actual in-canon answer for this, or anyone listening to this right now, if you're like, actually, Ginger Reno, they explain this in the game and you just clearly missed it. Thanks for joining me on my little rant. If there is an answer in game and I happen to have missed it, things like that does happen. It was still an interesting adventure to go on, and I wonder how close to the mark I am. But regardless, this is where we end up. So, all that to say, if you want to get the achievement Play Dead, then you need to wear the Revenant bell collar with the Necropants. So, there you go. That's a little bit of a tip there for you. And so, there we have it. I was intending to talk about a lot more in today's episode than just the Necropants and the Revenant collar bell, but I got on several tangents as I was going through today's episode, and this is kind of what we ended up with. So now I'm kind of coming up in the time where I need to stop recording because I have familial responsibilities. So I guess let's close out today's episode, and we'll go on from there.
Is an oath worth the weight of a crown?
So thanks everyone for listening to today's episode. I know it was a bit of a weird one. We just basically talked about Necropants and Revenant colors, but I think there's a lot of interesting lore in there to talk about, and it harkens back to a lot of the Pillars of Eternity lore that we started with, from talking about like who Wall is, where the Mowans are, how souls can get trapped in things, talking about archmages, which are established in the world before it, and spirit-based creatures and vessel-based creatures and revenants, and how animancy works. Like, all of this is found originally in Pillars of Eternity. And so I just say this to be as an encouragement. If anyone out there has played Avowed, you really like it, and you found yourself intrigued by the world, enough that you're listening to this podcast, you haven't yet played Pillars of Eternity, I highly recommend giving it a shot. Now, I know everyone online is saying that, so I will add this caveat. If it's not your type of game, you just can't handle it, you don't like it, then don't worry about it, obviously. Like, you only have so many hours to live in this life. Don't spend it playing games that you don't enjoy. But at the very least, I would definitely recommend giving it a shot, or maybe even watching or listening to a Let's Play on YouTube just as a way of experiencing the world, because it's one worth looking at. There is also some guidebooks that you can buy on Amazon. They're fairly pricey now because they're out of service, or sorry, I guess publication, that have a lot of lore about the world if you're interested. And obviously you have this podcast, but it's a fun game and there's also a lot in there to digest, but I digress. As far as what I've been up to and what I've been playing and doing, I haven't been really honestly playing much since Expedition 33, but I mean, I've played multiple games since then, but have just failed to have anything stick. I downloaded Eternal Strands on Game Pass to give it a shot, and I was very, very interested in the world, but I found myself not very engaged with the actual gameplay, and so after 2 hours of that, I kind of jumped off it. Death Stranding was also very similar. I downloaded the game, found the world very interesting. I knew the gameplay was not supposed to be incredibly engaging, and I was fine with that. The thing I wasn't fine with was the BTs. If I'm being honest, after like my 7th run-in with BTs and navigating them, even though I had a lot of stuff to navigate and deal with, whenever I ran into those things as obstacles, I wasn't like, oh yeah, here's a challenge for me to overcome. I was more like, oh, here's some stuff getting in my way to the thing that I want to do in this game. So I eventually just honestly put that down, and then I watched a Let's Play of like different parts of the game, obviously, and I read some parts of the story. And is that in poor gamer fashion? Is that a faux pas? I don't know, but I had to manage my time, and I knew I was never going to jump back into it. So that is what it is. I did also try Doom: The Dark Ages, but I haven't been in a first-person shooter mode or mood for a very long time. The closest thing to a first-person shooter I played recently is probably the System Shock remake, and that's more of the immersive sim stuff than it is for the actual shooting mechanics. And so I'm kind of just floating at this point in time. I want to still finish Citizen Sleeper 2, so I'm plugging away at that. I loaded up a fun goofball build that I've been having on Avowed, seeing if I can break the game in various ways as a magic caster and not doing things out of order. So I did that. I'm largely at this point in time just waiting for Metaphor ReFantasio to come out on Game Pass. That's a game I've been wanting to play. I just haven't actually spent the money on. And I know that if I don't play it when it releases, I'll eventually let it fall into my backlog. And I'm very likely not going to get it done because it's a huge game. But the fact that I'll be able to like get into it and try it, I'm excited just to do that. So I'm looking forward to that being released in a few days. Also, it was my birthday recently, and my wife gave me the best gift ever. She gave me 3 hours of uninterrupted time by myself, at which point she also bought a bunch of awful, awful junk food for me to consume, and I gamed for 3 hours, just kind of jumping around. I really have been enjoying Patrick's Parabox lately. I do love those puzzle games. I'm looking forward to the Thinky Direct, which if you weren't already aware is like a puzzle games video game group called Thinky Games, and they're doing a direct soon. Anyways, I'm going to stop rambling now. I'm obviously in a weird rambling mood today, perhaps because I'm a year older. I don't know, but there you have it. Thanks, everyone, for listening to today's episode about Necropants and the Revenant Caller. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you have any thoughts, comments, criticisms, or concerns about me or the show, or, just because things went off a little off the walls today, send me an email, worldofeora@gmail.com. I would really like to, hear feedback from you guys, as well as requests for future episodes. If you have sent me a request in the past of an episode that you would like, please feel free to send it to me again, because during Avowed's release, I got a lot of requests, and I have covered a lot of them, but I might have let some fall by the wayside, and I didn't write them all down in a formulated list like I should have. I did for a bunch, but not for some early on because it was new for me. So if there are any specific topics you would like, please send me an email. Even if you already have, just do it again. worldofeora@gmail.com. If you'd like to follow the show on Twitter, you can do so at World of Eora, where I mostly just post updates on when episodes release. But if there's any direct communication I need to give to everyone who is a listener, that's usually the place I'll do that. Or to give a shout out to people on Reddit, as I have recently. Lastly, if you would like to help the show or you'd like to support the show, there are a couple ways you can do that. One, you can support the show directly financially on ko-fi.com/worldofeora. I have no expectations on people doing that. It's just there for those who find value in supporting things that they enjoy in that particular kind of way. But if that's not the way you want to support, I totally respect that. But if you still do want to support the show, you can do so by engaging with the platform that you're listening on, particularly on Spotify by leaving a comment or a rating. or if you're on Apple, I was going to say iTunes, and I've changed my mind to say Apple, so now, whatever. If you're on Apple Podcasts, leave a rating and a review. Both of these methods help the algorithm say that you're engaged with the show, other people would probably like it, and then they'll recommend this show to people that listen to similar podcasts you do. So that'd be really awesome, especially if those of you out there who listen to really weird podcasts that are not related to this at all, like they're into like, I don't know anything weird, underwater basket weaving podcasts, and then all of a sudden they're getting this lore podcast for some random video game lore. Like, I don't know, that amuses me, as I'm sure it would amuse some of you. So there you go. Those are two ways that you can support the show. But ultimately, sending me an email, letting me know what you think, and asking questions and engaging in conversation is one of the best ways to support the show, because it helps encourage me to continue on, but also with just human connection, my dudes. And so that's my lame thing to say for the day. Thanks everyone for listening to today's episode. I hope you liked it. I've been your host, Eric, aka Gingerino, and I'll see you guys next time.